What if the most important part of your day is not the morning, not the hustle, not the meetings or the goals or the grind, but the quiet hour before you close your eyes? Most people end their day the same way. They scroll. They watch something mindless. They lie in bed replaying conversations that went wrong, worrying about tomorrow, or numbing themselves with noise until sleep finally takes over. And then they wake up the next morning, already tired, already behind, already carrying yesterday's weight into a new day. The Stoics had a completely different relationship with the night. For Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, the hours before sleep were not wasted or surrendered to distraction. They were sacred. They were the time when the philosopher turned inward, examined the day, extracted its lessons, prepared the mind for rest, and set the foundation for who they would be when the sun rose again. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not as a book for the world, but as private notes to himself, written largely at night by lamplight after long days of ruling an empire. Every evening he sat with his own thoughts, held himself accountable, reminded himself of what mattered, and refused to let the day dissolve without meaning. Seneca wrote entire letters about the importance of the evening hours. He believed that a life examined only in the morning was only half examined. The night, he said, was when the truth came out, when the noise of the world fell away and a person could finally hear themselves think. Today, we are going to look at 7 things the Stoics believed you must do every night before sleep, not as rigid rules, not as a performance of self-discipline, but as a genuine practice of living intentionally, one day at a time, one night at a time, until the person you are becoming is unmistakably different from the person you were. Before we get into the first thing, if you are getting value from this, take 1 second right now and hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it helps this content reach more people who need it. And if you are not yet subscribed, do it now and ring the bell so you never miss a video like this one. All right, let us begin. The first thing. Review the day without judgment. Seneca wrote in one of his most famous letters, "I will keep watch over myself and most usefully will put each day up for review." What makes us go wrong is that none of us looks back upon our own life. We think about what we are going to do, and only rarely of that which we have already done. Yet our plans for the future always flow from the past. The Stoics ended every day with what they called an evening examination, not a harsh interrogation, not a spiral of guilt or self-criticism. A clear, calm, honest review of how the day actually went. This practice is simple, but most people never do it. They move through day after day without ever pausing to ask what actually happened. Not what they hoped would happen, not the story they told themselves in the moment, but what actually occurred. What choices did they make? What did those choices reveal? Where did they act with virtue, and where did they fall short? Marcus Aurelius asked himself 3 questions every evening. What did I do well today? Where did I fall short? What could I have done differently? Notice what is absent from those questions. Blame, shame, excuses. There is none of that, just honest accounting. The Stoics believed that an unexamined day was a wasted day, not because every day had to be perfect, but because perfection was never the goal. Growth was the goal, and growth requires knowing where you actually stand. Tonight before you sleep, sit quietly for 5 minutes. No phone, no television, just silence and your own honest memory. Walk through the day. What happened? How did you respond? Were your responses in line with the person you want to become? If not, note it. Not to punish yourself, but to learn. The day is data. Use it. This single practice, done consistently over months and years, produces something that no external achievement can replace. The deep, earned knowledge of your own character. The second thing. Release what you cannot control. Epictetus taught one principle above all others, and it was this: there are things within our power and things outside our power. Within our power are our judgments, our desires, our impulses, our choices. Outside our power are our bodies, our reputations, our possessions, other people's opinions and actions, and everything that happens to us in the external world. This distinction, which the Stoics called the dichotomy of control, sounds simple. It is not, because even people who understand it intellectually spend most of their nights violating it completely. They lie in bed thinking about what someone said about them. They replay arguments they cannot rewind. They worry about outcomes that have not yet happened and may never happen. They churn through scenarios they cannot control over and over, as if the repetition itself might produce a solution. It does not. It only produces exhaustion. The evening practice the Stoics prescribed for this was a deliberate act of release. Before sleep, you consciously identify everything from the day that belongs to the category of things outside your control, and you release your grip on it. Not by pretending it does not matter, not by suppressing the emotion, but by clearly naming it for what it is. Something that is not yours to carry, what your colleague thinks of you, not yours to carry, whether the project gets approved, not yours to carry, what the future holds, not yours to carry. The only things you carry into sleep are the things within your power, your choices, your character, your intentions for tomorrow. Everything else you set down at the door. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present. The night is not the time to litigate the past or catastrophize the future. It is the time to arrive, fully, in the one moment you actually inhabit." There is a practice for this. As you lie down tonight, imagine yourself literally setting each worry down. Give it a name. Say it quietly to yourself, and then say, "This is not mine to carry tonight. I have done what I can. The rest is not in my hands," and let it go. Not forever. Just for tonight. Just long enough to sleep. The third thing. Acknowledge one thing you are grateful for. Gratitude in Stoic philosophy is not the cheerful, surface-level gratitude of making a list of good things. It is something deeper and more demanding. It is the practice of perceiving clearly, of seeing the actual texture of your life rather than moving through it in a blur of habit and assumption. Marcus Aurelius opened his meditations not with grand philosophy, but with a list of people he was grateful for and what each of them had taught him. His grandfather, his father, his mother, his teachers. He was meticulous about it. He named them. He named the specific qualities he had received from each. It was an act of seeing, of really seeing, what his life had been built from. Seneca wrote that the ungrateful person is the unhappiest person alive, not because they have less, but because they perceive less. They move through a life full of gifts without ever registering them as such. Everything feels ordinary because nothing is actually seen. The Stoics knew that the human mind is wired for adaptation. It takes what it has and makes it the new baseline. The extraordinary becomes ordinary remarkably fast. The job you once prayed for, the relationship that once felt like a miracle, the body that carries you through every day without complaint, all of it fades into background noise unless you actively, deliberately pull it into focus. The evening practice is this. Before sleep, identify one specific thing from the day, just one, that you are genuinely grateful for. Not a category, not health, or family, or my home. Something specific. The conversation you had with your friend that made you both laugh. The meal that was unexpectedly good. The moment of quiet in the afternoon when the light came through the window at exactly the right angle. The fact that someone held a door for you and you felt briefly that people are decent. Specificity is the key. The more specific you are, the more real the gratitude becomes. And the more real it becomes, the more it changes how you see the day that came before and the day that is coming. This is not optimism. This is precision. It is training your attention to find what is actually there, rather than defaulting to what is missing. The fourth thing, forgive yourself and others. This is the practice most people skip, not because they do not understand its value, but because it feels like conceding something, like letting someone off the hook, like weakness dressed up as virtue. The Stoics saw it completely differently. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. We are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To act against one another is contrary to nature. He did not forgive people because they deserved it. He forgave them because carrying resentment was contrary to his own nature, because holding a grudge was a punishment he inflicted on himself while the other person slept peacefully. Every night, the Stoics encouraged the practice of clearing the emotional ledger, not erasing what happened, not pretending the harm was not real, but choosing not to carry it forward into sleep. Not because the other person earned forgiveness, but because you have decided your peace matters more than the score. This applies to yourself as much as to others. Perhaps more. Most people are far harsher with themselves than with anyone else. They replay their mistakes with a cruelty they would never direct at a friend. They hold themselves to standards they would consider unreasonable in another person, and they carry this self-condemnation into the night, where it ferments into anxiety, shame, and restless sleep. The Stoic practice of self-forgiveness is not the same as making excuses. You looked at the day honestly in the first practice. You saw where you fell short. You learned from it. Now you release it. The lesson belongs to tomorrow. The guilt belongs nowhere. Lay it down. Tonight, think of one person who wronged you, even slightly, and choose to release your grip on what they did. And think of one thing you did that you wish you had done differently. Acknowledge it clearly, and then let it go. The slate is not wiped clean, but it is set down. And setting it down is what allows you to sleep and to wake up genuinely new. The fifth thing. Meditate on impermanence. Of all the Stoic practices, this is the one that sounds the most frightening and turns out to be the most freeing. The Stoics had a practice called memento mori, a Latin phrase meaning remember that you will die. They kept this thought close, not to be morbid, not to create despair, but because they believed it was the most clarifying thought available to a human being. The awareness of impermanence, when held honestly rather than pushed away, does something extraordinary to how you see your life. Marcus Aurelius returned to this theme more than almost any other in his Meditations. He wrote about how Alexander the Great and his mule driver both ended up in the same place, about how everything that exists will eventually cease to exist, about how the fame and the glory and the empire would all dissolve, and had dissolved, for everyone before him. And rather than finding this devastating, he found it liberating, because if everything passes, then nothing needs to be clung to. The argument from today does not need to be carried into next year. The humiliation from last month does not need to define you forever. The good things, the love, the laughter, the connection, do not need to be taken for granted because they too will pass, and knowing that makes them more precious, not less. The evening meditation on impermanence is not about death in a literal sense. It is about endings. Tonight, as you lie quietly before sleep, consider that this day will not come again. The version of you that woke up this morning no longer exists in quite the same form. The people you love will not always be here. The problems that feel enormous will one day feel small or will not be felt at all. What changes when you hold this clearly? Very often, the things that felt urgent deflate. The resentments that felt important shrink. And the things that are genuinely precious, the warmth of your bed, the breathing of someone you love nearby, the simple fact of being alive and conscious and here, expand into something almost unbearably beautiful. Seneca wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day." The night is where you balance the books, not with dread, with clarity. The sixth thing. Set your intention for tomorrow. The Stoics were not passive people. They believed deeply in virtue, in action, in showing up fully to the life in front of them. But they also understood that purposeful action begins with purposeful intention. Every evening, Marcus Aurelius did not simply review the day that had passed. He also looked ahead to the day that was coming. Not to plan every minute, not to build an elaborate schedule, but to set a single governing intention. Who do I want to be tomorrow? What quality of character do I want to bring to the hours ahead? This is different from a to-do list. A to-do list is about tasks. A Stoic intention is about character. It answers not what will I do, but how will I show up? Will I be patient tomorrow? Will I listen more than I speak? Will I face difficulty without complaint? Will I be generous with my attention? Will I resist the urge to react and choose instead to respond? Epictetus taught that the morning should begin with a reminder of what the day might bring and how the Stoic intended to meet it. That reminder was most powerful when it was set the night before, when the mind was quiet and the noise of the day had faded. The evening intention is also an act of self-compassion, because when you wake up the next morning with a clear sense of who you intend to be, the first decision of the day is already made. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from a foundation. Tonight, before you close your eyes, ask yourself one question. Who do I want to be tomorrow? Not what do I want to accomplish. Who do I want to be? Choose one word if you need to. Patient, present, courageous, kind, focused. Let that word settle into your mind before you sleep, and let it be the first thing you reach for when you wake. You have made it to the final practice, and if you have stayed this far, that already says something about the kind of person you are choosing to become. Before we get into it, drop a comment below and tell me which of the first 6 practices you are going to start with tonight. I read every single one. Now let us go to the last and perhaps the most underestimated of all 7. The 7th thing. Protect the quality of your mind before sleep. Everything you consume in the final hour before sleep becomes the furniture of your unconscious mind through the night. This is not metaphor, it is neuroscience. And it is something the Stoics understood intuitively long before modern science had the language to describe it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." He wrote this not as an abstract philosophical claim, but as a practical daily reality. He understood that thoughts were not simply things that happened to you. They were things you chose, or failed to choose. And the thoughts you allowed into your mind in the hours before sleep were especially powerful, because they were the last impressions the mind held as it descended into rest. Now consider what most people feed their minds in the final hour before sleep. Social media, designed by engineers to provoke reaction, to trigger comparison, to create anxiety and outrage, and the compulsive need to keep scrolling. News, which is almost entirely a stream of crisis, conflict, and catastrophe. Television shows built on drama, tension, and unresolved emotional arcs. Or, perhaps most damaging of all, the completely unfiltered return to the day's worst moments. The argument, the humiliation, the fear about the future. All of this becomes the raw material of the sleeping mind. The Stoics would have found this extraordinary. Not because entertainment is evil or information is wrong, but because the idea of surrendering the last conscious hour of the day to noise, reaction, and provocation would have struck them as a profound failure of self-governance. Epictetus taught that the philosopher's task was to guard the door of the mind. Not every thought, every image, every voice deserves entry. And the door is most important in the hour before sleep, because what you let in then does not leave when you close your eyes. The Stoic practice for this final hour is a set of deliberate substitutions. Instead of the scroll, you read something that elevates. A page of philosophy, a poem, a biography of someone who lived with courage. Instead of the news, you sit in silence, or in the kind of music that calms rather than excites. Instead of replaying conflict, you do the practices we have already described. You review the day, you release what is not yours, you find one thing to be grateful for, and then, as you lie down, you guard the final few minutes with special care. No checking the phone one last time, no opening one more app, no last look at the news. You allow the mind to settle, like water that has been stirred and is now given space to become still. Marcus Aurelius described the ideal mind as a sphere, perfectly round, perfectly balanced, not reaching toward anything, not pulling away from anything, just complete, just present, just at rest. That is what you are cultivating in this final practice. Not the absence of thought, not forced emptiness, but a quality of mind that is settled, that has been tended, that has been given the best possible conditions to rest and to renew. Now let us bring all 7 together. You end the day by reviewing it honestly, without self-punishment, just clear sight. You release everything that is outside your control, not because it does not matter, but because carrying it into sleep serves no one. You find one specific thing to be genuinely grateful for. Something real, something you can see and feel, not a category, but a moment. You forgive yourself and others, not as weakness, but as wisdom, because resentment is a weight that only you are carrying. You meditate briefly on impermanence, on the fact that this day will not come again, which makes it matter more, not less. You set a single intention for tomorrow, not a task list, but a quality of character you choose to bring. And you protect the final hour, guarding the door of your mind against noise and provocation, and giving yourself the gift of a settled, tended, genuinely rested mind. None of these take a long time. All 7 together might take 30 minutes. But done consistently, done with genuine attention rather than mechanical repetition, They will change the texture of your life in ways that are difficult to describe and impossible to ignore. Because the night is not the end of the day. It is the beginning of the next one. How you close one chapter determines how the next one opens. And people who live with intention, who treat the evening as sacred rather than disposable, who refuse to surrender their final conscious hours to noise and reaction, wake up differently. They wake up with a clarity that people who collapse into sleep cannot access. They wake up with a lightness that has nothing to do with their circumstances and everything to do with what they did with the hours before they closed their eyes. Seneca wrote near the end of his life something that has stayed with philosophers and students for 2,000 years. He wrote, "Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est." Everything else belongs to others. Time alone is ours. The night is yours. What you do with it is one of the most consequential choices you make every single day. Not because anyone is watching, not because it produces measurable output, but because it determines who you are when you wake up. And who you are when you wake up determines everything that follows. Begin tonight. You do not need to do all 7 at once. Choose one, the one that speaks most directly to where you are right now. Practice it tonight with genuine attention. And then, when it has become part of who you are, add another. The Stoics were not people who transformed overnight. They were people who transformed one examined evening at a time. And they became, through that practice, something the world had rarely seen and has never stopped needing. People who were genuinely, unshakably, quietly at peace. Be one of those people. Starting tonight. If this video added something to your day, leave a like. It takes 1 second and it means more than you know. Subscribe if you are not already part of this community, and share this video with someone who you think would benefit from it. And leave a comment telling me which of the 7 you are going to try tonight. Until next time, remember the words of Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Sleep well, and wake up better.